Welcome back to the Deeper Dive Podcast. My name is Bill Winnell, joined this morning by Father Bob Kilner. How are you, Father?
Doing well, Bill. Glad to be with you.
I want to introduce Father Bob. Many of you know him from doing our considerations from the clergy and certainly locally in the D.C. area. Father Bob is in the midst of writing a book. I guess not too strange for a priest to do so. And we're going to have a conversation about the project he's working on. What was the impetus behind it? What it's going to look like, and then we'll do a couple times a month podcast specials where we'll actually talk about the book and read certain parts of it. So I don't want to steal too much, Father Bob.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is the first time I've written a book outside of academic circles, outside of writing a thesis or something like that. And the book is called Diary of a Donkey Priest. I know, very catchy title. The subheading is this: a description of a simple and effective priestly ministry. So this book has been inspired by a lot of things going on in my own life and seeing things going on in the wider church. I hope that it will be a short and informative book for priests, for seminarians who are looking to really just inject some life into their parish, into their own life as priests. And I hope it's also very informative for the laity. It gives a bit of a view of priesthood that most people don't have a chance to see, because you only see your priest on Sundays most times, unless you're going to daily mass. And people don't really have a concept of what a priest does between Monday and Saturday. What does the priest do after he's celebrated a couple masses on Sunday? I guess he doesn't do much. Well,
you mean you do work more than one day a week?
There's like work and stuff to be done. Yeah.
Amazing.
The life of a parish priest. I was speaking with a priest friend of mine who's not a diocesan priest, and he said, "I could never do your job." And this is a bright guy. This is a guy who's, he went to an Ivy League school. He's got 4 different degrees, and he said, "I just don't have the wavelength to do what the pastor of a parish does, because we wear a lot of hats. We are, we're the priest. We're celebrating Holy Mass. We're hearing confessions. We're doing spiritual direction. We're the administrator of essentially 1 or 2 small businesses between the parish and sometimes a school or something else."
And I think that having worked in a parish, I think that is one that I think most people don't realize.
Yeah.
That you are running the equivalent of a business or 2.
Yeah, it's a few businesses. And prior to becoming a priest, I had only run my own business, and I had 2 employees. One was my little brother and one was my best friend. So this is a little bit different. So I think I have 42 employees now. And that happened overnight. I went from being an assistant with no responsibility really other than my priestly responsibilities to being the pastor of a parish with a school. So I'm learning a lot. And as I learn a lot about this, it's a pretty steep learning curve. I'm just writing it down. I'm praying about it. I'm sharing things. I'm asking questions with to other priests who know more than me. And I have, by the grace of God, found a way to simply and effectively run a parish that I think needs to be heard. And this is not to say I know the way. This is a way. This is something that I sort of stumbled into by the grace of God. And it's something that I think it's worth sharing, especially because we as a church, as a priesthood, we're about to hit this demographic cliff. We already have. In DC, we're doing really, really well with vocations. We're at replacement level and more. So there are more guys being ordained than are passing away or retiring every year. But that is not the case everywhere. I have priest friends who they were ordained around the same time that I was, and the same day they were ordained, they became the pastor of 3 parishes. That's unhealthy. That's unhealthy. It's necessary, but that's becoming the norm in a lot of dioceses across the U.S. and throughout the world. So this book, it's intended to be short. I don't intend it to be more than 50 to 100 pages at most. And it's just sharing those things that have been shared with me that I found to be extremely effective. So That's Diary of a Donkey Priest. I'll explain the whole donkey thing in a second here. um, that's my jam. Anyone who's been at my parishes knows that I'm always talking about the virtues of the donkey, especially as it pertains to priesthood, but also to the Christian life in general. So I'd like to share with you guys today the introduction to Diary of a Donkey Priest. All right, here goes. Diary of a Donkey Priest by the very Reverend Robert F. Kilner, or just Father Bob. Introduction. Be the donkey. The old spiritual director told the room full of priests, be the donkey who bears Christ into the midst of the world. This is our mission. It was a Thursday morning before Palm Sunday, and we had gathered to pray on our day away from the parish. He encouraged us to take part in the gospel. The church does this every Palm Sunday, responding as persons in the second gospel reading, speaking as those who witness the passion of Jesus Christ. The priest speaks as Christ, a lector as Pilate and Herod, the congregation as the soldiers, and the angry crowd. Each year, we have a visceral experience of the passion and death of Jesus Christ. You may see it with a new perspective as you enter the gospel story. But there is also another gospel that day at the beginning of Mass, one easily overlooked, the entry into Jerusalem. It too invites us into the scene. Luke 19, verses 28 through 40. After he had said this, he proceeded on his journey up to Jerusalem. As he drew near to Bethpage and Bethany, at the place called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples. He said, go into the village opposite you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tethered on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone should ask you, why are you untying it? You will answer, the master has need of it. So those who had been sent went off and found everything just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owners said to them, why are you untying this colt? They answered, the master has need of it. So they brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks over the colt, and helped Jesus to mount. As he rode along, the people were spreading their cloaks on the road. And now, as he was approaching the slope of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to praise God aloud with joy for all the mighty deeds they had seen. They proclaimed, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. He said in reply, I tell you, if they keep silent, the stones will cry out. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Who am I in this scene? You can consider, who am I during this gospel? Am I one of the disciples? And am I one of the pilgrims visiting Jerusalem for Passover? Am I one of the scribes or Pharisees watching with thin-lipped disapproval? Perhaps at different times in life you have inhabited different roles. A disinterested bystander one year, and a devoted disciple the next. Inspired by my spiritual director, I entered this scene through the eyes of an unexpected party, the donkey or the colt. I found it to be a fitting role for a priest or any Christian soul. I'm the donkey, and you can be too. It is a critical role. The donkey is not mentioned out of poetry or quaintness. Several verses are dedicated to the need of this donkey. The disciples entering the city for the donkey, finding the donkey, acquiring the donkey, and convincing others to let them keep the donkey. He is needed. The master has need of it. If we enter the gospel in this role, we understand that the master has need of us. The master, the all-powerful God, Jesus Christ, has deigned to have need of you. The donkey bears the Savior of the world, the King of Kings, on his back. He brings Jesus to the people. That is all. That is enough. There is nothing particularly glorious about being a donkey, but this one carries the King of Kings, and that alone gives more than sufficient meaning to his labors and his life. This book, then, is a kind of diary of a priest glad to be the donkey, nothing more than a small beast of burden who bears Christ to his people. The virtues of the donkey. I have a few original pieces of artwork in my office, all by amateur artists. One is a simple sketch of a donkey. It is my favorite piece of artwork. Below the drawing is this inscription by St. Josemaria. Would that you could acquire, as I know you would like to, the virtues of the donkey. Donkeys are humble, hardworking, persevering, stubborn, and faithful, with a sure step, tough, and if they have a good master, also grateful and obedient. I keep it on my desk as a reminder to imitate the virtues of the donkey. The most important of those virtues is humility. No one would read this gospel and possibly think that the donkey is the main character. It's about Christ, not the donkey, and the donkey knows it. Priestly ministry is about Christ, not the priest, and the priest ought to know it. Pope John Paul I recognized this when he wrote, "When I am paid a compliment, I must compare myself with the little donkey that carried Christ on Palm Sunday. And I say to myself, if that little creature, hearing the applause of the crowd, had become proud and had begun to bow his thanks left and right like a prima donna, how much hilarity he would have aroused. Don't act the same. We should help others so that we are not the center of attention. The donkey's goal is not to glorify himself, but to glorify God. He became a throne upon which our Lord and Savior sat. We don't get, nor do we need accolades for this ministry. It is Christ who does the saving, and it is Christ who is asked for our cooperation. God has acquired donkeys for the work of bearing Christ. The Master has need of you, my brothers." Learning the donkey's work. To my brother priests, do not fear being a donkey priest. These pages describe nothing extraordinary. God does his finest work through simple and willing souls. We must release ourselves from the fantasy of the priest as a kind of spiritual Superman. Grace does not depend on brilliance or workaholism. Often it shines more easily through the simple-hearted. St. Josemaria, again, in a sharp line, says this, "You, proud? About what?" This phrase reminds us that our successes are not our own, so we have nothing to be personally proud of. We're just donkeys, chosen to bear Christ through no merit of our own. Everything we have received, including our calling, is a gift. God has deemed to give us graces, gifts, responsibilities, and the ability to complete our work. He has formed us well and surrounded us with his holy people. To quote an old evening prayer, God has thought of me and loved me for all eternity, has formed me out of nothing, has delivered up his Son, his beloved Son, to the ignominious death of the cross for my redemption. God has made me a member of his holy church, has preserved me from falling into the abyss of eternal misery when my sins had provoked him to punish me, and has graciously continued to spare me, even though I have not ceased to offend him. Indeed, God has done so much for us. The prayerful soul recounts all that God has done for them and ends this prayer with this critical question. What return, O my God, can I make for thine innumerable blessings and favors of this day? The priest must ask this daily. Where this book came from. This book grew in the telling. What began as a series of memoirs of my first parish assignment grew into this book of simple suggestions for priests. During my first 2.5 years of priestly ministry, I worked with my pastor, Father Larry Swink, at Sacred Heart Church in La Plata, Maryland. Father Larry's boundless energy, rooted in prayer, was an inspiration to me as a newly ordained priest. In my pastor's work for souls, I saw a man dedicated wholeheartedly to bearing Christ to a world that needs him. It was not uncommon for Father Larry to have 10 meetings each day, in addition to times for prayer, Holy Mass, confessions, a workout, and administrative responsibilities. Let me be clear, few could or should have such a busy schedule, but he proved that such an effort was possible. He worked like a dog, or rather, a donkey, to great effect. Many souls gathered at Sacred Heart, returning to Christ from the pits of life-destroying addictions and sin, drawn to Jesus by the simple availability of one priest. What was once a quiet country parish became a hub of Catholicism in the county. As a pastor now, I've been surprised time and time again by the effectiveness of the simple ways of priesthood that I was taught by him. I keep looking to heaven and saying, "All right, Lord, that works." I was practically born yesterday, both into this world and the priestly ministry, but I found God's abundant blessings in these simple ways, this donkey priesthood. A time of need. We are facing a trying time as a church. A dearth of vocations has led to a demographic cliff for pastors. A generation ago, a young priest could expect to serve as a parochial vicar or assistant pastor for 15 to 25 years. Now, it is not uncommon for a man to be ordained and immediately assume the responsibilities of pastor for one or two parishes. I was blessed to have 4 years of ministry before being given those responsibilities. This book is an attempt to answer the needs of this generation. Let's be honest, we are an exceedingly pampered generation. Responsibility and adulthood were delayed significantly compared to our parents and grandparents. Suddenly, responsibility and fatherhood have been placed on our shoulders. Priests do not have the luxury of becoming a father in the slow, methodical, planned way that most biological fathers experience, anticipating fatherhood for at least 9 months, usually just one child at a time. The responsibility of fatherhood for hundreds or even thousands is abruptly laid on our shoulders. For seminarians and young priests who find this responsibility weighing on them, this book is an encouragement. You can do this by the grace of God. It does not take a person of great genius or extraordinary virtue to build the ministries described, but it does require prayer and a willingness to work. You may also notice that the following suggestions are nothing particularly revolutionary. These methods draw from the patrimony of the church and the lives of the saints. Each chapter is a rediscovery of the simple means of evangelization the saints have already employed, which have been only temporarily forgotten or cast aside. Donkey priests understand that it is not their role to reinvent the wheel, but to turn the wheel once set in motion by the saints to such significant effect. May this book grease the wheels of evangelization that have long been neglected. St. Josemaria Escrivá captured the spirit of persistent priestly ministry when he wrote, "O blessed perseverance of the donkey that turns the water wheel. Always the same pace, always the same circles, one day after another. Every day the same. Without that, there would be no ripeness in the fruit, nor blossom in the orchard, nor scent of flowers in the garden. Carry this through to your interior life." The simple perseverance of a faithful priest can bring life to the church. This book is for, but not limited to, priests and seminarians who want to inject the life of Christ into their parishes. This book is for those who are tired of the status quo and the constant erroneous refrain, "This is the way we have always done things, Father," when they try to recover some great tradition or to preach the fullness of the gospel. This book is for all those who read the Acts of the Apostles and the lives of the saints and see little resemblance to typical parochial life. This book is for those who know a world hungry for the truth and are not afraid to share him. This book is for those who want to see what is possible in their parish if only the priest is an imperfect but willing servant of God, a donkey priest. End of introduction.
Very good. I certainly set up for my wanting to read the rest of the book today. Um, Question for you.
Yeah.
So Cardinal McElroy calls you today and says, "Father, you've been doing a great job. I value your input. I want you to be on, not that such a thing exists, but let's say there's a board of St. John Paul II Seminary in Washington, D.C., looking for some input from young priests. We're going to add another year to seminary. How do we fill that year up? I mean, have you thought about things, in some cases, I think as a layperson, it's in so many people think that there's let's say there's material presented to you in the form of classes or seminars or whatever during seminary to prepare you for being a pastor. And when they find out that that's not quite true, like there's no, finance class on how to run a parish and things like that,
Mhm.
what do you think's missing from a non-theological point of view that would have prepared you better, if anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before our modern formal education in seminary, most priests spent a few years simply as a bit of a indentured servant to their local pastor, and that's how they became priests, and they were approved for priesthood, and they were ordained. Right. It grew out of parish life. You go to your pastor and say, "Hey, I think I have a vocation to the priesthood," and he'd hopefully pray with you, and then he'd take you under his wing, and uh, you'd be learning from him for several years on the job. It was on the job training, and that was before most parishes were not this were not particularly complicated in the 1400s, right? Um, so I think what the church did in having a formal education is absolutely paramount. We needed to do that because so many priests were just not well formed theologically. They didn't know their theology at all. There's a reason that first we get a philosophy degree, so we learn how to think. Then we get a theology degree, so we actually know, what we believe, right? And we can speak about it confidently. Um, and we do have um, in our current program for priestly formation, we have some opportunities to live in a parish and learn from the priest. And what the church has actually very recently done, I think they call it the synthesis phase. It's that last year of seminary, and I think it happens after you've been ordained a deacon, ideally, but before you're ordained a priest, you're supposed to spend essentially a full year in in a parish working with the priest. Now we're starting that. We're getting into that right now. The church is implementing that. The Vatican came down with that just a year or two ago. But I think it's going to require a bit of a paradigm shift for pastors. They need to be sent to pastors. These young men, these seminarians, need to be sent to pastors who will take the time to teach them. Which is it's asking a lot. It's asking a lot of the pastor.
Well, it's to what you spoke to earlier. You're a pastor, and you know what your daily schedule's like now.
Mhm.
Not that you would have time to have somebody shadow you all day long,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Let me stop and explain everything that I'm doing as I'm doing it. Um, yeah, it's not exactly easy, but that seems absolutely necessary. Um, so there's a lot of on the job training, and thankfully I had two great pastors who would stop and uh, you know and explain pretty much everything they were doing. They said, "Hey, this is how you put a budget together. This is what it looks like. These are the people you contact. This is how I communicate with my finance counsel." Um, Or, hey, this is the process of hiring and firing, right? Or this is the process of keeping up with your staff and making sure that everybody's on the same page, and regular staff meetings and one-on-one meetings and setting objectives and things like that. I'm glad people taught me that. And I'm still learning. Thank God I have a deacon who for 30 plus years worked in an administrative capacity in his secular job. And at one point he had, he was responsible for over 400 employees. So he's an incredible resource to me. So I'm still learning, and I don't think I'll ever stop. But yeah, to answer your question, I'd say we really need to implement what the church in her wisdom has asked us to do, which is that synthesis phase. Um, but we really need to prepare priests for what that looks like. How do you teach this guy who's shadowing you, this newly ordained deacon? You can, you, he's got that new car smell, right? How do you inform him in such a way that he'll be a bit more prepared for priesthood and the responsibilities thereof?
Yeah, I think most people, while not thinking of a pair of diocesan parish priests as a religious, but in some respects, I think a lot of them, don't understand kind of what you're thrown into your first day at a parish, as a pastor. You are essentially taking on the roles of everything you do with your collar, but also you've become HR. You've become a mental health counselor in some cases. You've had to, dealing with all the personalities of your staff, not your staff alone, and then your parishioners.
Mhm.
Basically, you said a boss. It's got to be. I can't really think of anything else out there like that.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, and if it wasn't for the grace of God, I don't think any of it would work. You know, I think it was G.K. Chesterton who spoke about a friend of his who visited Rome, a Jewish friend of his who was thinking about conversion to the Catholic Church, and he said, "Okay, well, I've studied it all. I think I'm on board, but I've got to do one last thing. I've got to visit Rome." And G.K. Chesterton warned him. He said, "Well, I'm not sure you really want to visit Rome before before you become a priest. Not because Rome isn't wonderful; it is. But having lived there for 5 years, it's a wonder the lights stay on. Right? It is the most dysfunctional place, just overall, like on a country level, right? Um, on a municipal level, but you also see kind of the raw humanity of the church and how." I think G.K. Chesterton spoke of the knavish imbecility of members of the church, right? Especially leadership in the church, and he's absolutely right. We leaders within the church, we're not okay, right? We're sinners just like everybody else. And well, that friend of his came back and said, "I'm ready to convert." And G.K. Chesterton was actually a bit surprised. He said, "Well, didn't you see all the corruption and all the madness?" And he said, "Yeah, I saw it. There's no possible way that any organization being run in that way could have survived if it was not of God." so, so I think, lean on the grace of God all you can, but let's also be very, very practical. And you'll find in the book, it's become a bit of a spiritual memoir and a simple instructional manual. It always comes back to prayer. If we're not praying, we're not on the team. If we're not praying, we will fall. Right? If we're not men of God first and foremost, with the Holy Mass as the center of our life, with our holy hour as the absolute necessity, we will fail.
And
It's not a question of if, but when.
I'm sure
Right?
you would add to that, and probably do in the book, the importance of fraternity amongst your brother priests.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a chapter on that coming up, about how to build a culture of fraternity within the priesthood, one that builds people up, builds your brothers up. Because so very often it's kind of lonely at the top, right? You're here as a parish priest. You may be the only priest in the in the parish, and you have nobody to really go to for advice. I think I called during my first year as just an administrator. I think I called Father Ray Schmidt over here at St. John's in Hollywood every single day, almost every single day, sometimes 3 times a day, to ask him advice about things, like, because it was just such a steep learning curve. And he picked up the phone 9 times out of 10 and would have a half an hour conversation with me. That's what I needed. Now, I probably needed that 8 years prior, during seminary, but I had it when I needed it. Um, Priestly fraternity is so important. And we do it really well here in Southern Maryland. Praise God for these great guys who put that together, who really work at it. It takes an effort, but we've simplified it to make it sort of fit seamlessly into our schedules.
And real quick, Father, before we end, it may not be a part of your book yet, but I think a lot of lay people, especially, are one thing they're shocked to hear sometimes of a priest, and I've heard several priests say it, is the priesthood can also be it's sometimes a lonely vocation, profession, if you will. I think it's harder for a lot of people to understand. Like, you mentioned earlier being blessed at the parish you're in, and I would say the same. I'm in strong lay support of their clergy, whether it be deacons, priests, religious. So they don't see that. I mean, I think our priests always have an invite to somebody's house for dinner and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
But there is that I've heard before, and I think some people don't. I don't think realize that sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. There's a beautiful prayer. You often see it on the back of the funeral card for a priest. Uh, um, and I can't remember the exact words, but it talks about um, being a part of every family, but a member of none, right? Um, being so you're integrated. You're like you are a man in the midst of the world, right? We are secular priests. That's where we're meant to be. So we're part of the lives of our people. We're fathers. We're involved. There are people always around us, right? Father Drew Royals at one point, he said, somebody asked him if he got lonely. He said, I don't have time to be lonely. There's just people around me all the time, right? It's like, I want to break from you people sometimes, right? And he was joking around a bit, but there's a truth to that, right? There's just the people of God. They love their priests. They love their priest in spite of our tremendous flaws, and they're fantastic. And yet, even if our lives are integrated into the lives of our people, there's at the end of the day, it's I leave the home of a parishioner, and I go back to my rectory on my own, and those are the times of a bit of loneliness, right? So we'll certainly talk about that in the book. Those are the times you run to the tabernacle, right? You have to have this intense life of prayer, because there's no one who understands the priest better than Jesus, the high priest. No matter what you're going through, no matter what your struggles are, no matter what your temptations are, he's been through it all, right? That sense of loneliness, oh Israel, Israel, how I've longed to gather you together, right? You who have stoned the prophets, rejected them, right? There's that when we're praying through the gospel in the words of Christ, so very often, like that's the prayer on our heart. Like, I so desperately want to bring Christ to the people, and sometimes it's rejected, and sometimes it doesn't work the way we planned. But Lord, you get it. You
And I
get it.
guess real quick, while we're talking about that alone time or spiritual loneliness, sometimes, I guess Kevin Wells' article comes to mind recently. How so many priests feel they don't have, a relationship with their bishop, or the bishop has their back. I'm not talking about here, no specific diocese whatsoever, but I think that is a thing too that according to the article, at least many priests, opened up and said, yeah, that can be. There's no, there's no father figure, if you will, to run to in your vocation. Sometimes for some
Yeah.
priests.
Yeah, for some priests, for sure. I've been edified by Cardinal McElroy and his. I mean, he came into you know uh, to a ton of responsibility here and some issues, financial issues in particular, and he's really turned a lot of things around really quickly. It hasn't even been a year. He spent most of this first year meeting with every single one of his priests and representatives, lay representatives from every single parish. That's impressive. That's really, really impressive. And it was an open conversation. You could say whatever you wanted to, within respect and
Sure.
obedience, right?
And he did as well, which was comforting to the lay people I know.
Yeah. Yeah, there was
He didn't
a great
he didn't
sincerity.
sugarcoat anything, you know?
Yeah,
We're in
exactly.
we're in a mess right now, and here's what I'm gonna do about it.
Right. And that's the sign of a father.
Yeah.
It's really good to have a bishop as a father like that. We can disagree on certain things, and we do. That's all right. My father loves and respects me, and I can actually contact him and not have like a fear of, um, you know, retaliation or something like that. Which is just fantastic. So, um, I think we do need priests need fathers too, right? We need God the Father. There's a fair amount of conversation in the book about your relationship with God the Father. Um, but there's also an entire chapter about getting a spiritual director and seeing him often, right? Have a spiritual father who you can talk to often about all of these things, right? A good confessor, a good spiritual director works wonders, right? He keeps you accountable. He encourages you, calls you to something better. He's there to listen when you need somebody just to listen to you. We priests need spiritual fathers too. So we can do that for each other. We can be spiritual fathers. I've got several spiritual fathers, guys who are 20, 30, 40 years older than me and really know what they're talking about and are very fatherly. They're good priests. They're good fathers. And I have a spiritual director and I've got a great bishop now. So how blessed we are. But that is absolutely essential.
Well, Father, I can't wait to read the book. I can't wait to continue these conversations. We'll probably do them twice a month or so, as the Father makes his way through finishing the book. You thought about? Tell me about the cover art. The most important thing of the book. Come on, is it?
Oh yeah,
Is it going to
I've
be?
got that cover art.
Is it
Well,
going to be the
that
picture in your office?
the picture in my office is I think it'll be end up being the cover art. It's and you can share this with the in the podcast notes or something like that. I'm sure. It is not a particularly attractive um, sketch,
Does it look
pencil
like
sketch of a
something
donkey,
like on the
right?
wall behind the cash register at the restaurant, whose
Right, right,
grandchild?
right.
Right?
He's
Okay.
got like an oversized head
Yeah,
and like a belly. It's like donkeys are not particularly elegant creatures.
absolutely.
And yet there's virtues to be emulated of them.
No, you laid them
That
out well. All right. Well, I can't wait. We'll continue this again in a few weeks. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.